Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are, everyone. My name is Annie Hardison Moody, and I am the Program Director for Faithful Families, Thriving Communities. And it's great to be with you all today. We're really excited to have some of our partners from the Wellborn Foundation to be able to share a little bit about what they've been doing with Faithful Families. So our agenda for today is we're going to start out with a presentation from Amy Hansen and some of her colleagues at the Wellborn Foundation. And then after that, we'll move to some program updates. I am going to introduce Amy, and then I'll turn it over to Amy and her team for for an overview of kind of what they've been able to do, and then some conversation and time for questions with them. So Amy Hansen is the Faith Community Coordinator for the Wellborn Baptist Foundation. A registered nurse since 1989, she's worked in a variety of settings, including bedside nursing, home care, outpatient clinic, worksite wellness, and community clinics. Since 2011, Amy has worked to promote health and wellness in the church and community and the promotion of faith community nursing. She serves as the Vice Chair for the Tri-State Health Ministry Association, is a member of the HMA, and serves as educator for the Foundations in Faith Community Nursing Program that's affiliated with the Vincennes University Jasper campus. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Amy and her team for some time to hear about their program, and then we'll have some time for conversation before we do some Faithful Families program updates. So thanks so much, Amy.
Thanks, Annie. Can everyone hear us okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let me get this screen back up here. Usually my greatest challenge is technology, but it looks like we're good. Everybody see the screen okay? So I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to do a little introduction and I'll kind of share who's here with me today, and then kind of turn it over to the coordinators that really implemented the programming piece within their churches. And then we'll kind of pull it back together and tell you what everyone's favorite topic of evaluation usually looks like. So really our goal was to create the culture of change within churches that would help them look at healthy eating and active living. So with me today, I have the two women that are across the top, and then also Joni, who's right would be the left of your screen. We did have 3 churches that participated along with us, and we'll be sharing that along with you today as well. So I wanted to just give you a brief overview of our foundation so that you can have an understanding of who we are and where we're from. So the Wellborn Baptist Foundation is a hospital conversion foundation. We've been in existence for about 15 years, very similar to any hospital conversion foundation. The sale of a local healthcare institution, those funds were rolled into a foundation. And with those monies, we continue to serve the community that the hospital served. That's why our map looks a little bit funny at times, because we live really right down in the pocket of the tri-state of Indiana, Illinois, and Kentucky. And these were the counties that most utilized Wellborn Hospital services when they were in existence. Kind of in the middle of the map is Vanderburgh County. Vanderburgh County is the really hub of the counties that we serve. It's the most metropolitan area, with the largest city being Evansville. Evansville itself, the metro population runs around 300,000, but that does really pick some of those congruent counties along with that. So Wellborn Baptist Foundation, we really have a very simple mission statement. We want to create communities that flourish with the well-being, abundance, and peace that God desires. And we do that through multiple vehicles. We really have 4 focus areas, but we're really focusing today on that healthy eating and active living aspect of that. As one of our initiatives that lives under the Healthy Eating and Active Living initiative, we created a program called Upgrade. And Upgrade is designed to just allow anyone to think about what are some upgrades they can make, simple steps within their life to help lead them towards a healthier lifestyle. It's really been threefold in the areas that we've targeted. So we have upgrade churches, which we're talking about today, but we also have upgrade schools, and we also have upgrade community. So we really looked at piloting a program with 3 local churches. And we were looking at some key components when we wanted to reach out and ask churches about piloting with us for this. We wanted to already have an established relationship. And based on some of our past work, we had worked with faith community nurses. So we reached out to faith community nurses that we had relationship with and we knew that were already serving in their churches. We wanted to be geographically diverse. So when we say urban, our city isn't a large urban city, but we do have probably about 125 within the city center. And so we looked at a church that was in that area. We have a lot of outlying suburban areas, and then we definitely, living where we live, we have a lot of rural communities as well. So we really wanted to focus on, would this replicate in all of those types of settings? And then we also felt it was important to be denominationally diverse. Wellborn Baptist Foundation is a Christian foundation, and so we did approach churches that also had that same Christian foundation in their theology basis. We did a lot of research before we started the pilot, and we're very impressed with the work of Faithful Families and the curriculum piece. We needed that foundation piece in order to have something for our churches to build upon in the pilot program. Our pilot program is actually a 2-year program, and Faithful Families is only one component of it. So the components that we looked for was we originally sent a modified RFP, which is a request for proposal, to 5 churches. They all applied to us to be considered for grant funding, and we did accept 3 for that, and they each received $20,000, which was dispersed to them quarterly at $2,500 per quarter over that 2-year period. We did ask that the church had full facility access. That was important to us. We do have a lot of churches in our community that utilize other facilities or something where that's a shared use. But on a pilot program, we didn't want to have other barriers that maybe we didn't have control over. We did ask that they already had current healthy eating and active living or HEAL initiatives in place, and all 3 of these churches did have at least some limited programming that they had already attempted or completed. We looked at what their opportunity was for community impact. So we looked both at dosage for impact and also within their local congregation and outside the walls of their church. So were they a good community partner? Definitely had to have that support of senior leadership. That was actually a piece that was built into the grant process. They needed to provide a letter of support from that senior leadership. And we learned along the way that might look different for every church. That might be the lead pastor. It could be a key elder, deacon, something like that. So we kind of had to learn who that person was as well. And then we did ask each of our coordinators to be willing to attend the 2-day training summit in North Carolina, which we all attended last December of 2017. That was built into their grant funding, so those monies did not come out of their own expenses. That did allow for one person from each church to be represented there. We created an in-house rubric. It's very similar to what we use for all of our grant processes. And then 2 of us within the upgrade staff reviewed those independently, scoring each church that had submitted based on their answers to a variety of questions that we had asked for that. We did have 3 applicants that we felt were strong, and you're going to hear from all of those today, and those were designated to be pilot upgrade churches. We had one church that had some potential, we felt like, but they didn't have really a really strong leader for a programming element yet. And we did offer them a planting grant in the amount of $5,000, but they chose to decline that. So I'm going to turn it over briefly to Charlotte and Mary, and they're going to talk a little bit about the work that they did at All Saints Catholic Church.
Thank you, Amy. This is Charlotte, and Mary's also here with us, and she's going to pop in and she's going to say some stuff as we go along. What we did with our, I wanted to talk briefly about our journey because each one of the churches went through this journey where we applied for the pilot grant through Upgrade Churches. And then we did a faith community health assessment to find out what the health needs and spiritual needs were about the church. And then we did the faith community assessment, which is put together by the Faithful Families. And then we looked at developing an action plan for each of our churches, and each church is individual and it's a little bit different, looks a little bit different for each one of those churches. And then with All Saints, we did do a development of a recommendation for Eat Smart, water pitcher policy, and purposeful movement. We wanted to do what it was a policy, but it ended up being a recommendation, and we'll talk about that briefly. And as Amy said, we needed to attend the training for Faithful Families curriculum there in North Carolina. Then once we were trained, we would come back and we would deliver the curriculum to our churches within 1 year. And then we would all evaluate the program and then decide where we're going to go from here. When we did our faith community health assessment, we looked at the demographics of our population. We looked at those health needs, and then we had them rate their health, what their knowledge was about that health condition, and how they care for themselves, if they can get to health care with transportation, and if they were comfortable talking with their physician or with the faith community nurse that was within the community. And with those 5 top health concerns, we had sleep problems, stress, nutrition, high blood pressure, and weight control there at All Saints. Our spiritual needs were ability to let go of issues, anxiety, despair, forgiveness, grief, loss, and loneliness. Your mouse is going crazy on me. Hang on just a second. Yeah, it just went wild. Okay.
Okay, bear with us.
Bear with me just a second.
Piece.
Let me know if you need me to help.
Okay. No, I don't want to stop sharing. It did stop sharing.
Okay, so see if you can just go back and share again. This is our presentation, right? Mm-hmm.
Hold on to your mouse. Just this button, go. Can I use these? Okay.
Okay, we're almost there, guys. I think that's what you were. Okay.
One thing that we did was, like I said, we looked at like a water policy, which turned into a recommendation. We really wanted to encourage our parishioners to drink water and eat healthy food options. And actually, to get this recommendation passed, it took us almost a year to go through the appropriate channels. We had composed our recommendation from the health ministry team. And then we went through the chain of command up to leadership and presented to our parish council to get this passed. And basically what this is anytime that there is food served, that we will have an option of having a water pitcher available for them to have drinks. And then we would also have a healthy food option available for those that are attending the event. And this just goes into the details why we did that. And we kind of tailored this off the one that was provided by the Faithful Families curriculum. And we did the same thing with exercise. And with exercise, we strongly encourage, like, for activities that are happening there at the church, they don't want to do that during meetings. But like if there's a church function, like with youth group and things like that, we strongly encourage them to do like the activity up to 10 minutes of physical activity as would be tolerated by those presenting. Like with our parish picnic, we've had some physical activities that they could do there at the parish picnic if they decided to participate in those. Each church developed an action plan, and with our action plan, we looked at health and wellness infrastructure to actually assess to see where we were at, plan to where we're going, and then we do ongoing evaluation, like we did an evaluation at the end of year 1, and we'll do an evaluation again at the end of year 2. We looked at what health education that we offered, A lot of our health education that we were offering previously before this was the blood pressure screening that Mary had started there at the church years ago. With that education, we talk about hypertension, how to control hypertension, how you would treat hypertension, how to monitor the hypertension and things like that. And then we might have had like a hit and miss activity here and there within the church. And we had exercise. They have like chair yoga. Is it chair yoga?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yoga in the chair or chair exercises. So that, but with the, like I said, with the physical activity, we did the purposeful movement recommendation that would encourage those to participate in physical activity. And as you can see, some of this is ongoing and some of this has been accomplished. And we just evaluate where we're at once we finish an activity. With our healthy eating and active living, we did nutritional content development. We have a health ministry team and we had monthly meetings. And then we would decide, what we were doing, how we were going to implement that. And we are working with the University of Southern Indiana food nutrition students and a dietitian. And she had her students do some service learning projects with that. And with that service learning projects, those students would, I'm going to talk about nutritional content. Well, I'm off the slide somewhere, but that's okay. So we kicked off, we kind of did our healthy holiday makeover. It was like preparing a dinner for Thanksgiving around Thanksgiving time that was more healthy than normally your turkey, your mashed potatoes, your gravy, cranberries, all those goodies and things like that. And we kind of did a makeover with like baked chicken and sweet potatoes versus, mashed potatoes and offering healthier options. We kind of kicked it off that way. And then we set up our calendar where we were going to do our 9 consecutive meeting times with the Faithful Families curriculum. It was decided we were going to do that after our mass at 10:30 in the morning because people would already be there on the campus to do that with the parishioners. And then we actually ended up with an additional class afterwards based on the recommendations that those that attended the class wanted. With that, we used the Faithful Families curriculum outline, and we had the leader guide training with the PowerPoints and things in there. We had the handouts we provided at the sessions, and the food nutrition students, they did sample menus, they did some meal planning, and then they also did the colors of the food and provided what nutrients and what vitamins were in those foods of specific colors, and that was an additional handout that the parishioners received at the program. And then they did the service learning, and through this service learning, this just defines what service learning is. And it's just they do an activity that's meaningful, they volunteer their time, and they're not paid for the services that they do. And with this, the students developed a cookbook that we also provided to the participants. And these are just some of their learning outcomes that they had with their service learning project. And we wanted to connect them with the USI community, and we also wanted them to connect with the community overall of Evansville. They did the recipe collection. Each student modified 2 recipes for participants and made it more healthy. They introduced more vegetables. They replaced all with other herbs and spices. They talked about the key ingredients and then the nutritional value for each thing that was there, and what kind of health claims that go with it, how to prepare food with low cost and some culturally appropriate foods, and then how it would taste and what the appeal for the taste was. And then when we finished our 9-week curriculum, which we actually did in 8 weeks because we decided since we were connecting with our community and it was Father's birthday, we actually integrated the last 2 sessions together so that those that were participating in our program could attend his birthday celebration. And then in May, what we did a cooking with herbs and spices class, and they provided lentil soup for the parishioners to sample, and it was flavored with different plants and herbs and spices. They did purposeful movement break during the session, provided handouts, and they also got the cookbook. And then we also provided them with the Faithful Families cookbook, gave away door prizes and incentives at each one of the sessions we did. And at this one, they got herbs, and then they got also herbs and spices for the door prizes. And now I'm going to turn it over to Joni Bitzer.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be able to present what Bluegrass United Methodist Church did with our Healthy Eating and Active Living grant. A lot of what Charlotte just spoke about, we actually did as well. However, because of the demographics of our area, there were some modifications that were required. We are the suburban church placed more agriculturally in the county. And what we found is that while the curriculum was pertinent for us in terms of the cooking, what we found was that people were more interested in doing hands-on learning as opposed to having it given to them in PowerPoint or in lecture form. So once we learned what type of learners they were, the classes became much more interactive and much more effective for us. What we took away from it, of course, we were continued to do our monthly blood pressure screenings and our blood sugar screenings. One of the first things that we looked at being out in the county is that because we're outside of the city limits, we have a water source concern out there, and we wanted to put a water filtration system at the church. The church is a fairly large church. We have expanded in the last 5 years, and we also have a preschool that houses 300 preschool children right across the road from us. So not only was I working with the church in itself, which is a congregation of around 700 people, we're also looking at a preschool that houses quite a few children. So we had a lot of things to consider. The water filtration system seemed to be one of the things that the preschool was most concerned about, because they are consuming a lot of water during the day. They're very active and they're outside a lot, and we wanted to make sure they had the best source of water. So the water filters were placed on their water fountains, and we also placed a bottle filler in the gymnasium, and that has been a great resource for those outside activities that utilize our gym. One of the first things I started out with the program after we got through the cooking classes was the what's next. So I actually went to the preschool teachers and said, what could we put in your classrooms that would make this relevant for kids? How can we start getting kids to think at an early age about where their food comes from? So we built some raised bed gardens, and we placed them in their playground area. And we placed in there some cherry tomatoes. We placed some herbs, some basil, rosemary. We put in some very pretty little flowers, and the children all had the opportunity to start those plants from seed in their classrooms and then transplant those seeds into the raised bed gardens before the end of school. Over the summer, the health ministry team took care of those gardens, and when the children came back in the fall, they were able to partake and smell the herbs, taste the herbs. And as the teachers report, they had a really hard time keeping the kids out of the cherry tomatoes because they all wanted to eat them, pick them and eat them, which was absolutely what it was for. So out of that raised bed garden, not only did we have cherry tomatoes and herbs, but it also spurred on the fact that we needed to create a farm market. Since we are agricultural, it seems to make sense for us. A lot of our congregation does have gardening in their backyard, but there's also a portion of people who don't have that space, and we chose to bring in a master gardener and talk about patio gardening and also what we need to do to prepare our gardens in order to provide the most healthy fruits and vegetables. So we had a gardening series of 3 classes and got everybody excited about that possibility. And then this summer, as the vegetables grew, we actually started selling them in our farm market with the congregation support, and those who garden, they wholeheartedly were willing to bring in their produce, which we placed out on the table in the welcome area, and people would come and put their donations in a box. There was no fee for anything. It could have been taken for free, which was certainly fine. This year, we are going to be looking at partnering again and trying to expand our farm market. We had a lot of basic fruits and vegetables, and I think this next year we're going to be looking at expanding out a little bit and doing more of the okra and things that you wouldn't normally find in a backyard market. We were lucky this year that we found a few beekeepers, and the honey was quite delicious, and we were excited to have that. The other thing that we did is that we created a walking path to encourage people for active living. And we did that over our parking lot in front of both the preschool and the main campus. We have a path around it that is striped out, and also we have now placed signage out there. The signage has got the Upgrade logo on it. It also has a scripture that encourages people to continue to walk for their health. Walking wasn't really quite enough because we do have that elderly congregation in our church. And this seems to be the time of year when we're seeing a lot of hip and knee rehabilitation. So what we did, we purchased an adult tricycle, and it gives those people who are going through that a rehab part of their life, and also those who are not maybe as stable as they need to be, an opportunity to ride the bicycle around the walking path, and that has been in great use lately. So we're looking forward to sunny days where we can have more people out there. The other thing that we are really excited about is that we're looking at all generations, all ages. What can we do to keep people busy? And we started a yoga class that has continued. We are now the second year into our yoga. We're averaging between 20 to 25 people. It's taught in sessions, 6-week sessions. And we max out our list every session in terms of who can come into that. But I think the really neat thing about it, what we do, understanding from a nurse's perspective, what our biggest problem is that we have with some of our seniors is falls. So before we sign them up for yoga, we do have them go through a fall risk assessment, which is provided by our physical therapy assistant. And then we actually follow people throughout their yoga courses, and some of them are now up into that 2-year period. We reassess them every 6 months to see how they score on that fall assessment. And we hope to have some data that will be ready to be shared here in the next few months. The latest class that we have opened up at Bluegrass is called PIO. It's Pilates and a combination of yoga. We started out with 40 people in that class, and that's a very strenuous class, I might say. And we are right now have 15 people, and it's ready for its second session as well. So, and it's actually attracting a younger group. I would say our group would be our 30s and 40s are in that. We do have a few people who are capable up into their 50s and beyond, but mostly the 30s and the 40-year-olds are doing that class. The cooking classes that we started out with, that first 9-week course, set the stage for what we've been able to accomplish from March up until November. And I will tell you that we have multiple healthcare professionals within our congregation, and they have all been very generous with their time and their expertise. But we do have some people who are lay people, and they have a passion in their heart for cooking. And we've been able to find those people and find the service and find their gift. And that has meant a tremendous amount for those people. Those people have taken these cooking classes to an entirely different level. After the 9-week course, the interest was so keen that we wanted to look at doing another mini series during the summer. We're using fresh vegetables and herbs out of the gardens. So we did a three-unit mini series, met 3 Sundays. Then next, out of that sprang a fall class of 3 series. For that series, we did cooking with herbs and spices. We did cooking with fish. And we also did a grilling class, which was taught by one of our master grillers at church, all highly attended. And out of that, those 3 classes, we now have our final class for 2018, which will be healthy, holiday appetizers, and that class is already maxed out at capacity as of this week, and it's 10 days away. So we are excited about what has we've been able to do at Bluegrass in terms of meeting people's needs within the church, looking beyond the four walls of our church and saying that our church is our community. The community is actively engaged with us. I think a lot of that is due to the fact that we are a preschool, but also the services and the classes and the opportunities that we offer make us a very bright hub in the community. So we will continue to modify classes, change, but we have found a niche in the market with healthy eating and active living and are so grateful for having had this opportunity. Thank you.
So this is Amy again, and I'm going to kind of step in for Sharon, who was representing St. Matthew Church of Linville, Indiana. That's in one of our congruent counties, Warwick County, and she was unable to be here today. She has a little bit of a unique model. St. Matthew Church in Linville is a small rural church. Their average Sunday attendance is about 60 people. They do definitely have a wide age span in that, but she would say that primarily it is an older generation congregation that's regular attenders. Many of them are lifelong residents of the community. They all know each other, and was one of their greatest assets when they offered the Faithful Families curriculum piece was that they really could draw from their entire community. So they actually, of our 3 churches represented, they had the most in attendance most weeks, even though they are the smallest community. But again, I think it's because it is small, and they invited their friends and neighbors, and there wasn't quite as many distractions for other things that might have been pulling them in different directions. But as a result of that, they really focused most of their efforts on community outreach versus things that were happening directly within the walls of their church. I will say that all of our churches have done an excellent job of inviting and encouraging community to be a part of their efforts. Most of those efforts are taking place on church grounds, whereas in the St. Matthew model, they've actually moved it outside their church. So the 2 greatest examples of that would be the discussions regarding a farmer's market. St. Matthew is about 2 miles outside of the little small community, and for them to put the farmer's market on their property would have been difficult for multiple community members to attend. So they're actually working with the town council. There's a small library and a gazebo. It kind of looks like one of those picturesque small town areas when you go there, and they're working with the county council to begin hosting in the spring of 2019 a farmer's market where multiple churches, multiple community members would bring those farm products and have those available for people to purchase. And then the second piece that they have done is several members of their church and community are now working together with a local community organization called Warwick Trails Association to create a 2.5-mile paved trail, which will connect their schools to their library to what is also called the Coal Museum. So kind of their community landmarks, they will all be connected together. It's really creating safe routes to school for a lot of students. It's also creating just an ability for people that live in these rural communities where it's difficult to get out and walk. Just as Joni had said, they did on their parking lot, they're doing this in a trail setting that they're being key partners with. So that's kind of an overview of her part. And I'm going to switch real quick now and just talk a little bit about evaluation and how we did that, utilizing and modifying the tools from Faithful Family. We felt it was very important that we use an external evaluator to really oversee our evaluation efforts. So we contracted with a company that's here in town and has done a lot of work for nonprofits. And they kind of helped us oversee that data collection and then also the interpretation of it. As I think everyone mentioned, for sure Charlotte shared that all of our churches did use the faith community assessment piece at the beginning, and bless their hearts, they started with the old model, and then when Faithful Families updated it, so we had a scoring piece, they went right along with me and repeated it again for us. So They did it multiple times. They should really know the assets that they have there within their local congregation. So we had them do that really around June of 2017. And then we asked them for a 1-year check-in mark, and I'll share some of those early learnings here in just a minute. But we really won't do our final assessment until June of 2019. We took the pre and post evaluation tools for the Faithful Families curriculum piece, and we modified them slightly with our external evaluator. We used most of the same core questions, but I'll be sharing in just a moment here, the group that we were ministering to and sharing this curriculum with, none of those would have met that SNAP eligibility piece. So that was one piece that we tried to kind of not make as much emphasis on in our own evaluation. It wasn't something that was needed. And then the final piece for evaluation for us is just that narrative format. We want to be able to tell the stories, to hear what's actually happened. And so all churches have done a great job of kind of replying to us about every 6 months to give us an overview of just what's gone on within their ministries. So we do have some early learning back that we really collectively are learning, and we continue to do that. One of the big pieces that came back as far as from evaluation is we really would have liked to seen how we could have maybe measured some spiritual impact. We think what sets this program apart is that it does have a spiritual element, and yet we recognize that we didn't really measure that either baseline or at completion of the program. So that's a piece that we would like to think about creatively. How can we do some measured change in behaviors there as well? For our particular audience, the 9-week curriculum was somewhat problematic. We do live in rural Indiana, so I laugh, but they had to adjust some of the times based on farming season, when it got dark, when it was light, those kind of things. All 3 of our programs combined the last 2 weeks together. So none of our programs actually went a full 9 weeks. They all completed in 8 weeks. The feedback that they got is that many of them would have liked to seen this accomplished in a 6-week time period, which also may be somewhat reflective of what church Bible studies are many times set up. It may just be that that's more what they're familiar with, is that 6-week programming piece. But we lost a little momentum as those last few weeks came in. And then as Charlotte addressed, when we would start to use the word policy, it really could shake things up in the church. And so we had to really change our wording to that recommendation. We still accomplished the exact same thing. You heard Charlotte and Mary say that, it took a while to even get that recommendation on the water policy. But by removing that word policy, we seem to be able to have more open conversations. And then also just those key elements, communication has to be strong among ministry leaders. Some of our churches had multiple staff and ministry leaders that were volunteering. And so to communicate that message about a water recommendation to all of those people can be somewhat difficult. And so that's been a little bit of a barrier that we faced. And then also just letting the volunteers being seen as experts in their field is something that we're hoping that will continue to build within time. I wanted to share with you briefly about our demographics because I did tell you how we had modified it just a little bit. So we have on the far left side of the screen kind of our Faithful Families sample, and then our 2 counties are represented there. You can tell that we, as a Faithful Families core groups that took the curriculum piece, we had a high number of women that participated. Again, not unusual in a church setting that we would see more women participating in these types of events. Our age range was very typical for kind of even where we live. So that really stayed pretty consistent to that. We do not have a lot of diversity in the tri-state area. So we recognize that. And as we're moving forward, we are looking at pilot expansion and talking specifically with churches that have more diversity within them than the original 3 that piloted this program for us. You'll notice that those that participated in the classes were highly educated. Many of them had had bachelor's, and several had postgraduate degrees that took this course. We think that's why some of the modification needed to be made within the curriculum piece itself, and possibly why the 9 weeks seemed a little long. We did hear a little bit of feedback that some of the things seemed a little elementary, but again, you have to look at your individual audience, and this was the audience that we had. You'll notice that that is not typical for the demographic in the county that we live in. It's just the audience that we attracted for the program itself. These are our early results. At the end of each, we combined all 3 pilots to present that information for evaluation. We were very excited about our numbers that came back. As you can see, they did exactly what we had hoped we would accomplish through using the Faithful Families as our core curriculum. So even the numbers, you'll see where they jumped or decreased many times, it's even higher because they maintained it, a habit that they'd already established. So we were very excited about these numbers, and we're happy to share this data, the full report, with anyone that would like that as well. So we did have some areas of greatest change, and those are kind of outlined for you there. Really, a lot of it was thought process. The nutrition fact really did seem to be probably the piece that most of us experienced the most questions about. It seemed to be the time that we got people most engaged in the actual learning process of that. So at the end of year 1, we did ask them to do a follow-up faith community assessment utilizing the tool that's provided by Faithful Families. All 3 churches did show an overall improvement in all 4 of the target areas. We think it's a pretty significant improvement. Most of that change was greater than 10%. Our external evaluator was then able to look at that faith community assessment and begin to make some recommendations. He was a neutral party, so those recommendations may or may not have worked in an individual church setting. I can give you an example. If he suggested maybe they add a walking trail and they're located in the urban core and are surrounded by sidewalks, that wasn't going to be something that they could implement. So again, having an external evaluator, but also knowing the audience has been very important to us. They will complete a second one at the end of the grant cycle, which will be in June of 2019. So the final piece that I kind of wanted to share with you today is really from a devotional that I had used, and I've shared it with each of our coordinators on a regular basis, because when we asked them to come alongside and do this work with us, we were asking them to be brave. And we really feel like they stepped up to the plate and were brave in all of these areas. But the final box in the lower right corner is really all we were asking, is that they just be brave enough to say yes, and they all were. And I think that we've learned from each other through this process. This is just kind of an overall thank you for the multiple partners that we had during the time of this grant process that we have are in process of completing. Our actual completion date will be June of 2019. We do have references that'll be available to you as well, and our contact information, which is really, really a lot of words on that screen, but that kind of gives you an overview, and we'll have that provided to you as well.
Thank you so much, Amy, and everyone. That was a really very interesting presentation. And I think one of the things that it speaks to is the way that you all were really able to adapt Faithful Families in those different congregations and kind of what it looked like. And it's such a nice overview for folks who are maybe new to Faithful Families or who've been doing it, to help people to think about it's so contextual, right? Like everything that happens is going to be so contextual depending on where you all are. So thank you all for that presentation. And I want to open it up for questions for the Wellborn team. Does anyone have questions? And you're welcome to take your mic off of mute, or you can put them in the chat box and I can repeat them.
This is Christy Demetz from Michigan State University Extension, and I have a couple questions. And the first question is specific to the All Saints Catholic Church, and I remember the speaker saying something about 2 different assessments, one being the faith community assessment that comes along with the Faithful Families curriculum. but then I believe she said something about a faith community health assessment. And I would just like to learn a little bit more about that, if that was something that they developed, if I heard that correctly or not. Maybe I misheard that. And if it was something that they developed, would it be something that they would share?
The Faith Community Health Assessment, we've looked at 2 different health assessments. All Saints had used one here in 2000 and what year was that, Mary? 2008. Okay. Hers was 2008, and I was at a different parish in Illinois, and I had used one, and it was probably around the same year. And we combined the 2, and basically what it was looking at was the demographics, of course. Then we were looking at the health needs of the parishioners. We gave them an option of choosing between those 20 things that were listed and asked them to rank the top 5 for that. And then we also did the same thing for the spiritual assessment to ask them to rank the top 3 of their spiritual concerns. And then we had them talk about whether or not they felt comfortable talking with their faith community nurse or the pastor or their healthcare provider, and if they had transportation to and from the doctor, if they needed to go to and from the doctor. And
Yes, the health assessment was provided to the congregation after service. Our pastor allowed us time for the parishioners to fill that out after service during at church. And the other assessment that was mentioned is actually assessment of our resources and our values and missions and things within the parish. So it's more of administrative assessment.
And many of those health assessment tools we have all been equipped with by going through the Faith Community Nursing course. So that's where many of those have been accessed. We're certainly happy to share. They're not original to us, but we're certainly happy to share those. But you can also many times, if you have access to Faith Community Nurses, one of the greatest assets is we share things very openly.
Thank you.
Access to a public health nurse. The public health nurse also does like a community assessment, looking at the health needs.
So we have a question from Maria, who said that most of the participants were adults, which, being an adult curriculum, that makes sense. But did you all engage young people, or how would you think about engaging young people in this work? Maria says this is a challenge for the team in Illinois, something that they want to kind of explore. So did you all have any intergenerational projects or ways of kind of engaging young people? I know the participants were on the were older, but any thoughts on that?
Annie, what I would say to that, we did have a young lady who came in with her mother, and she does have some issues with textures, eating different foods. What we found a little bit with her is that I was able to give her mom some different recipes, like, where you could actually hide some nutritious vegetables within cookies and brownies and that sort of thing, but also just the hands-on cooking component. Instead of doing the lecture series where she would have to sit there and listen, she actually participated in some of the classes. So she and her mom could actually stand there and talk and, be marinating vegetables or something like that. So I think just having that component, it establishes a communication between mom and child, and there's actually learning that occurs at that point.
The second time we offered the curriculum through All Saints, we worked with the United Methodist Church in town at the hub, like it's downtown on Main Street, on Franklin Street. We had one child to attend the sessions. He attended, and he was the son of one of the health ministers from the church, and he attended like 4 of the 5 sessions. He was very active. He sampled the recipes. He asked questions, and we did more like a PowerPoint lecture format versus the cooking class. But he did participate, and he enjoyed himself.
we are very interested in that family engagement piece, and all of our churches have been interested as well. You know, how can this be modified for youth groups? The cooking, the hands-on cooking has been a huge draw for all of our churches, or even just the taste testing. If they didn't actually prepare the food, getting to try something they typically would not. So any insight anyone else has, we're love to be a partner with that.
And just to kind of piggyback on that, I don't know if anybody is on who was a part of this project, but our partners at the Department of Health in New Jersey, through their larger kind of grant, they partnered with Rutgers and did like kind of a cooking academy with young people based on faithful families, like taking the lessons and what you all said, but making it a little bit more cooking intensive. And that's something that we've thought about here and done some of here in North Carolina too, is really building out that cooking piece, but to create more family classes. But as you all know, that when you do that, you've got to you have to incorporate a lot more time too for the classes, because cooking obviously is very time intensive, and especially when you're cooking with children or cooking with young people, there are a lot of things that have to be built into that, knife skills and food safety and all of that stuff. So it creates like longer classes. But if that is something that people wanted to explore, I think, we could, as we move towards this national partnership model, these are the kinds of things that we could, get a group of folks together to maybe pilot something, look at a grant where we could pilot something. So if there's interest, let us know. That's something we'd like to think about too.
I have another question about the Hospital Conversion Foundation. I've never heard of that term before, and I may know of some of those foundations that are here in my area. I'm just not aware that that's actually what they are. Are there other foundations like yours in your area? And how would somebody identify them? Is there a national association, or is it just kind of state by state?
So there are other hospital conversion foundations, but it's not really a network as such. They usually are formed when a hospital closes or a healthcare system closes. And those monies usually are somehow mandated how those can be spent. And so many times they are rolled into how those can be spent for the greater community good. I will tell you, I've worked here about 7 years, and I've looked at a lot of national programs, models. I feel like we're pretty unique where we live and what we do. I think there's a lot of foundations out there, but our focus areas being kind of targeted in certain counties, and also being having some of those core components of being that Christian-based foundation that brings in that faith-based piece in everything that we do. So I'm sure there are some out there, but I can't give you a whole lot of other models because we've looked. That's why we were so excited to find the Faithful Families curriculum, to be honest, because it was such a nice blend of taking, some basic information and then adding that spiritual component to that.
Yeah, that's what I really love about it. And also with the lay leaders trained within the faith sites, that they can be the cheerleaders or the champions of the program, however that might work for that particular faith site. So I love this curriculum. However, I'm having a really big struggle in Michigan on how to get buy-in. And it sounded like you, through this project, you required that there be a parish nurse and that they already have some type of health programming already going on. Maybe not real robust, but at least something going on. I think that readiness to change that shows does help. because when you're trying to start from ground zero and the faith site doesn't have any health initiative going on, it's a little bit harder sell. But if anybody knows what the magic phrase or the magic approach might be, I am so willing to learn from any advice or suggestions that people might have on the call.
We would agree with that. I mean, that was really part of the reason that we actively pursued the churches that we pursued, is because we knew that we weren't going to have to start from ground zero. They already had a good knowledge base about what preventive health looks like. I personally think that one of the key elements for us was being able to identify faith community nurses that had some, and it's a basic certificate course that they receive. This is not, extended knowledge that they're receiving, but it is something that gives them that foundational base. Now, as we're looking forward, even as a foundation at additional pilots, we're even thinking strategically about, what if we have someone that has a great candidate that is not a faith community nurse? What type of baseline training would we expect to provide for them, that they also would kind of be on the same page as us when we begin? Because it is a challenge. If you're trying to get into a church and this has not been on their radar screen, it's never going to be their number one priority. We recognize that. Their number one priority is going to be to spread the gospel. But we hope that this information can be shared enough that they would see that equipping their members to serve others is a key element of that.
I think, Christy, your question too is something that, Julia and I were just working on an article on the program. And I think, stages of change are in the kind of the way the program was developed in terms of participants, but it would be helpful to think about maybe looking at some stages of change, literature around community change, to think about like what's the best place, what's that sweet spot, like you're saying, for recruiting faith communities to be a part of the program. Yeah, it's a really good question.
I think if you are from public health or you have a health background, you get that the environmental support helps to reinforce those nutrition lessons, and that all makes sense. But it's a difficult thing to explain to somebody that isn't familiar with public health and has many other priorities, health not being physical health of parishioners not being maybe number one. Of course, our faith leaders absolutely do care about our health, but what was said, they're thinking about the spiritual community. It's hard. It's a hard program to explain for me in a concise way. And maybe that's just something on me that I need to practice and kind of really think about. How can I best explain this program that will make people want to do it, I guess. So it's just been a struggle, but we're still working on it. We have several people trained in the curriculum in Michigan, and they keep pounding away and trying to do it. So any tidbits that I can bring back to the group would be great.
One thing you need to look at, is kind of enforce that we're treating the whole person. It's holistic, it's all tied together. It's mind, body, and spirit.
And also identifying who that champion is, because I will tell you that every one of us, if we approach the individual pastor or the leader of the church and it was one more thing for them to do, it was not going to happen. So we knew that these women were champions for it. And so they had the relationship to have the conversation with the lead pastor. And when he could understand from them their passion and how this was equipping them to utilize their gifts in ministry, it became much easier for that leadership buy-in to happen.
Yeah, thank you. That totally makes sense, because you definitely need somebody on the inside that people trust, people go to, that can help, I guess, support and encourage that they adopt the curriculum or the program. Yeah, I just like to hear what other people have done and what they've found successful. I was going to tell you, Annie, that in Michigan we have a tool. It's called ORIC, and it probably is an acronym for something, and you might be familiar with this tool. But I actually think it does measure readiness to change. So let me look into that, and I can share that with you if you're not familiar with it.
That would be great. And I think Laura and Maria are kind of chiming in on the same things in terms of like other partners, connections to faith communities, and then getting kind of the leadership buy-in. And so thank you all so much for that presentation. I want to give others a chance to kind of chime in if you have any updates about your program, or kind of what's going on with Faithful Families where you are. But before we do that, I just want to say one more thank you to the Wellborn team for that really, really excellent presentation. And it's given me a lot to think about, and I hope that it's given you all a lot to think about as well. So thank you all so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So let me get to PowerPoint. Here we go. So does anyone have anything that they would like to share with us? We have a couple of minutes for any partner updates, any things that are going on in your Faithful Families world that you'd like to share for the good of the group. All right, well, I'll share some updates with you all from the Faithful Families team. The first thing is, if you haven't already, please be sure that you submit your implementing partners form. So those of you who are returning Faithful Families partners, you should have received a link to a Google form from us. We are in trying to build up this network of folks who are doing this kind of faith-based health promotion work, specifically doing that work through Faithful Families. We want to get a sense of what you're doing so that we can better connect people and share that work with others. So you should have received a link, but if not, we'll be posting this slide or these slides on our website, and so can resend that information out to you as well, just to let us know kind of what you're doing and what you're up to with Faithful Families. The second thing is just a quick reminder that our national training is coming up December 5th and 6th in Raleigh. You can register on our website for just a couple more weeks. We'll still have registration open. So if anyone from your staff needs to attend, please go ahead and register today. We're really excited. We're gonna have a similar training model to what we did last year. It's gonna be very interactive. We've got some guest speakers, including James Kennedy will be back from the University of Illinois at Chicago. But also this year, Janae Avent Harris, Dr. Harris will be with us from East Carolina University, and her work is on mental health in the Black church. And so we're really excited to have Dr. Harris with us to help us start thinking about, what might it look like to think about, as we were talking about earlier, not just kind of physical and spiritual health, but also mental health. And so that's kind of our growing edge with Faithful Families, and we're going to have her here to talk about that as part of our training. So very excited about that. Oh, oops, let me see. We will be sending very soon a year-end program evaluation. Again, it'll be a short Qualtrics survey. As we talked about on our last call, we'd like to just get a sense of the basics of what you're doing, how many faith communities you're serving, how many people are a part of those faith communities, and and just kind of a basic sense of what's going on with faithful families nationally, so that we could be able to put together like a broader picture of what's happening with faithful families across the country. So that you all know, our team, our Faithful Families team of Kim, Julia, and I, we're going to have a strategic planning retreat in January where we're going to be looking at that year-end program evaluation, looking at our national implementing partners, and thinking about some strategies and ways that we can come back to you all in the new year to think about ways that we can more intentionally work together, whether that's around program evaluation, whether that's around piloting innovative new projects, like we've already talked about one on this call today, or two actually. One, how could we better engage young people? And two, how could we better engage families and think about kind of building out the cooking components? So those might be things that we, could come back to in the new year and could think about together as a group. So filling out that year-end program evaluation will help our team to get a sense of the overall national picture, so that we can then come back to you in 2019 and say, look, here's some things that you've told us. Let's think about how to move this forward together. So you will receive that email soon from us. The other thing that we would like your help in is thinking about what kinds of webinars you'd like to see. We've also been thinking about the format for the webinars, and thinking about, some alternative methods of doing this. Webinars are, it can be hard to have conversations. So we might be thinking about two alternative methods of building conversation and building kind of our partnerships across the country. If you have ideas for webinars or topics that you'd like to think about, we'll be sending out a link to a Google form so that you can contribute those ideas. And then lastly, another area where we want to have some continued dialogue is we do want to, a year from now, host another Faithful Families Summit. One of the things that we heard from our last summit was that it was way too North Carolina focused, which made sense at the time in the program because we really had built out the program in North Carolina and we're just growing the national partnership. At this point, we're now in 22 states across the country, and so we would like to have your help in thinking through what that summit should look like, what kinds of topics we should cover, who we should bring in for speakers. And so to that end, if you are interested in being a part of a group with me to help brainstorm planning for that summit, we're not asking, I know, I'm not asking for a conference committee team that would have to do the logistical aspects of it, but really kind of just a brainstorming group to help us think about the structure of the summit, what it should look like, how we should reach out to people, who we should invite, and what some potential topics would be. So if you're interested in being a part of a group that might meet a few times over the next few months over Zoom to talk about what that summit might look like, send me an email and let me know. And by email, we'll show you all that at the end, but hopefully everyone has my email address. And if not, it's on our website, which is just faithfulfamilies.com. So let me know in the next week or two if you're interested in being a part of that brainstorming group to help us plan what a Faithful Families Summit could and should look like for 2019. Any questions about those upcoming dates, evaluation, webinars?
Hey, Annie, this is Julia.
Hey, Julia.
I just wanted to add one thing to the upcoming webinars. I know a couple people have already sent me emails about, topics that they feel like would be really great for us to cover for our especially our national folks. And I just wanted to say, if you have ideas of presenters, that would be great to share on certain topics. Please let us know. There's a place in the Google form for you to put in your contact information if you are comfortable with us reaching out to you and kind of picking your brain about potential presenters. And if you would also like to be a presenter on a certain topic that you feel like would be really helpful for our national partners, definitely let us know that as well. That's
a great point, Julia. I think, when we love hearing about the great things that you all are doing and also the challenges that you're having. And so that's kind of how today's conversation came about. Was Amy sent us some of their evaluation information, and we said, gosh, this would be great for other people to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So you all are the experts in this program because you're doing it, and you're doing it in very diverse communities across the country. So like Julia said, the speaker could be you and should be you. So not just thinking about people who are kind of outside of you, or even this kind of community of people. So just a last reminder, this is our team. I think a lot of you know because you probably tried to email her. Kim is on maternity leave. She had baby Ethan 5 weeks ago. Yeah, 5 weeks ago. He's adorable, and she's doing really well, although obviously not getting a lot of sleep. So if you need anything in the coming weeks, basically until 2019 when Kim will be back, email Julia or me, and we can get you everything that you need. We're trying to be as quick and efficient as Kim is, or I'm trying to be as quick and efficient as Kim is, but that's never going to happen because, as you all know who've worked with her, she is super quick and efficient. So we miss her, but she sends everyone her greetings, and yeah, just let us know if you need anything that usually you get from Kim, things about ordering, invoicing, and stuff like that. Any final questions before we log off for the day? Any final questions or thoughts? Oh, actually, one thing to chat. Maria said that they're planning on piloting the program in Spanish. A quick update about that. I know some of you have been wanting this for years. We are in the process of having all of our program materials translated into Spanish, including the script, the PowerPoint script. So in the past, we've only translated the materials that participants receive, but now we're in the process of having the script translated as well. As you all can guess, that's going to be a really long process because we'll have it translated, and then we will have native speakers review that translation and then edit that translation, and then it'll have to go back to graphic design to be put back in the curriculum. But that is something that is happening, and that will be hopefully available in 2019. Well, it will be available in 2019, hopefully in early 2019. So I think if that's everything, we will end our conversation here, and just with our sincere gratitude for your continued partnership and work. And please let us know how we can help with anything that you need related to Faithful Families or any kind of faith-based health promotion work. So thank you all very much, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Bye.